Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a very powerful anti-meta Pokemon for the Open Master League, and that is level 50 Avalugg. Avalugg is a pure Ice-type Pokemon that typically runs the moveset of Ice Fang, Body Slam, and Avalanche, but today I actually TM'd off Body Slam and I'm running Earthquake to hopefully be a nasty surprise for Steel types. The meta as a whole seems pretty weak to Ice, so tested out Avalugg and honestly exceeded my expectations as an anti-meta pick. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and check out Avalugg in action in the Open Master League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a great lead, Giratina Origin into Melmetal. My opponent is going to save switch into their own Giratina, but since switching takes a turn, I will be able to make it to my Shadow Ball before they make it to theirs. I get shield advantage, and now I can send in Avalugg. Avalugg tanks whatever they throw here. Opponent baits with an Ominous Wind, but my happiness is short-lived as they get the Ominous Wind boost. Their defense and attack now buffed. I will commit the shield. The Shadow Ball would be doing more damage than it typically would. I'm going to farm up with the Avalugg and go for the Avalanche. Avalanche, despite the fact that they are boosted, is still going to be enough to KO, and back in comes the Melmetal. Melmetal typically has nothing to fear from Avalugg, as Melmetal is going to be resisting both of its charge moves, so they go for the Rock Slide. They're looking for the farm down, and we make it to the Earthquake. Do they respect it? They do not! Earthquake smacks the Melmetal. I can now send back in the Giratina. Giratina will be able to tank all of the charge moves from the Melmetal, no problem. They go for Rock Slide number 1. That's just not going to cut it. They can go for Rock Slide number 2. Giratina still does not care. Opponent going to get farmed down, so they're forced to switch, and in the back, they have Togekiss. I'm going straight for the Shadow Ball. That gets the shield, and now I can send in Zacian. My Zacian is running a bit of an unorthodox moveset. I'm actually not running Close Combat. Instead, I'm running Snarl, Wild Charge, and Play Rough. Basically, with the goal that the threat of a close combat means that most people are not going to be switching to Steel type in, so that way I can have Wild Charge to cover against the Flyers and Play Rough for the Giratina. In this case, double up on Wild Charge, KO the Togekiss, and that's game over. Picking up a neutral lead in the next match, Giratina Origin into Groudon, and considering that I have Zacian in the back, which does quite poorly against Groudon, I am very happy to stay in here and play out this lead. I go for the Shadow Ball, but I lose CMP to the Groudon. Groudon fires off the Precipice Blades. That is going to hurt. Giratina returning fire with a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is going to connect, getting Groudon below half HP. Here, I'm just going to go for the Ominous Wind. This will not KO, but at this point, I'm just looking for chip damage. Ominous Wind is going to connect. They bank a Precipice Blade, save switch into Rayquaza, and Rayquaza is about to know the meaning of pain as in comes Avalugg. They can lower my attack with a Breaking Swipe, but it's not going to matter. These Ice Fangs absolutely shredding Rayquaza, and I leave with a ton of energy. In comes the Groudon. They're firing off their Precipice Blades. I'm committing the shield. What do they have in the back? It's a Lugia, and they are so weak to Ice. There, I think my opponent got the one-turn bring-in, so I tried to throw in good timing, and it ends up being on alignment, giving them an entire Dragon Tail for free. That's quite unfortunate, but the good news is it's not going to matter. I can throw the debuffed Avalanche, bring in Zacian, and Zacian can handle Lugia quite nicely. This Aeroblast, not going to KO, and I can just double up on Wild Charges here, and at this point, this game is 100% over. Opponent recognizes that, no shields the Wild Charge, and that is a good game. Hopping into the next match, leading Giratina into Zacian. Opponent save switches into Dialga, and this is honestly a problem spot for this team, as I do not have a good response to a Dialga save switch. So I stay in with the Giratina, fire off the Shadow Ball. I was looking for chip damage, but I end up getting a shield instead, and now I can send in Zacian. Since I don't have close combat, my Zacian actually does struggle against Dialga. I can make it to the Play Rough here, but Play Rough is not going to be enough to KO. My opponent no shields the Play Rough. That will get them low. They're going to make another Iron Head, and I will commit a shield. I do want to try and keep switch advantage, because if they switched out of the Zacian and Giratina matchup, odds are they're running double nuke, so they are completely walled by my Giratina. I overfarm, go for the Wild Charge, and get the KO. My opponent is able to quick attack down. I'm going to wait the clock to make sure our clocks are back aligned. In the back, they have Yveltal, and it's time for Avalugg. Avalugg, these Ice Fangs are adding up. They do have enough for the Focus Blast. I call it. It's the Dark Pulse bait. And now we are in the driver's seat of this matchup. Avalugg is very tanky. I go for the Avalanche. My opponent going for another Dark Pulse. But guess what? I do not have to shield this. Avalugg able to tank both Dark Pulses here. Avalugg farming up, making it to the Avalanche. Avalanche will KO. Opponent can send back in the Zacian, but Zacian not going to defeat the Giratina, and my opponent concedes the match. Picking up a tough lead in the next match, Giratina into Dragonite. I'm going to farm up some energy, save switch into Zacian. Opponent is going to respond with Ursaluna. So far, my opponent is incredibly weak to Avalugg. Honestly, that was something I was noticing playing my sets. A lot of teams very, very weak to ice. So I threw Avalugg on the team, and honestly, I was not disappointed. Avalugg with Ice Fang is of course slow to get to charge moves, but man, there are just so many teams that are just double or even triple weak to ice. I even run teams pretty weak to ice as well, so the Avalugg pick ended up working out quite nicely for me. I'm able to make it to another Play Rough here. Play Rough is going to get the KO. In the back, my opponent has Excadrill, and the threat of a close combat meant they did not send in Exca to my safe switch Zacian. They go for the drill run. I send in Giratina. In comes the Dragonite. Dragonite does have quite a bit of energy here. I'm going to commit a shield with the Avalugg. Opponent goes for the Dragon Claw bait, and they make it to the Superpower. Superpower hits for super effective, but Avalugg will be able to withstand that and farm down. In comes the Exca. Exca trying to go for the farm. We make the Earthquake. No baits here. Earthquake KOs. And that's game over. We see same leads in the next match. Giratina into Zacian. We'll have to see what moveset are they running. Opponent staying in. They are running Snarl. Typically with Snarl, they are going to be running Play Rough. So I will want to save switch out of here eventually. I fire off the Shadow Ball. That's going to be shielded by my opponent. Throw one more Shadow Claw. Save switch into my own Zacian. I tank whatever they throw here. My opponent fires off the Wild Charge. And now in comes Shadow Lugia. I'm farming up, going for the Wild Charge, and this Wild Charge is not CMP. Switching took a turn, so they receive the energy now, and I can now CMP on the second one. That is huge. Wild Charge gets the KO. My opponent is not able to make their charge move. They send in their Giratina. They've seen Wild Charge. Surely I don't have Play Rough. Surprise, it's a Play Rough. And that's going to get the Giratina low. I can send in Avalugg. Avalugg going to tank whatever they throw here. They fire off the Shadow Ball. That's no problem for Avalugg. And the opponent concedes the match. Great lead in the next match. Giratina into Melmetal. Opponent save switches into Dialga, and we know how much of a problem Dialga save switches are for this team. Staying in, firing off the Shadow Ball, looking for chip damage. Opponent commits the shield. So this is playing out similar to how the previous Dialga save switch did. Dialga farming up, they're going for the Iron Head. I know that I can tank one, so I am going to let that through and then go for the Play Rough. As we've seen, Play Rough will not KO here. Play Rough is going to get the Dialga into the red. Farming up with the Zacian. They're going for Iron Head number 2. I will commit the shield. Look to overfarm as much as I can, and then go for the Wild Charge. Wild Charge is resisted, but it will be lethal here. Wild Charge into Dialga will get no shielded. My opponent sending in the Melmetal. Melmetal will be hit with a Wild Charge. They've seen my moveset. They know I do not have close combat, so they're going to let that go. And now I can send back in the Giratina. Giratina did take a lot of Dragon Breath damage to the point where double Rock Slide will honestly come close to KOing here. Rock Slide number 1 is going to connect. They're going for Rock Slide number 2. This will not be enough to KO. I will be able to survive. And now I can go for the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball definitely going to hurt. I'm going to have to switch. They let it go. In the back, it's a Therian Landorus. And my opponent just stops tapping. Avalugg gets the full farm down. And that's a good game. We see a familiar lead in the next match. Giratina Origin into Zacian. Again, we'll have to check the moveset. It's quick attack, but they're staying in. If they're staying in, either they are incredibly weak to Giratina in the back, or they do have Play Rough. I'm going to let this go. My opponent is running Play Rough, and that's definitely going to hurt. I'm farming up a ton of energy here, and I'm firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is going to connect into the Zacian. I farm up, bank a move for later, send in my own Zacian, and my opponent is staying in here. They're going to be firing off a Play Rough. Play Rough is going to connect. I'm farming up with my Zacian. They throw on alignment, giving me a Snarl for free. I believe this means I can probably Snarl down now. My opponent lowered their defense. I get the Snarl down. My opponent is going to send in Groudon. I accidentally throw an extra Snarl, so I end up going over 100 energy. That is not ideal. I'm able to grab a shield. I go for the Play Rough as soon as I get it. Play Rough. Decision time for my opponent. Do they use the final shield? They do not. I switch back into the Giratina, and I'm going to be firing off the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball gets them low. Groudon able to hang on. I'm going to let this go. I'm just going to trust in Avalugg. Opponents typically weak to Avalugg, but not today. My opponent has a Kyogre in the back, and this is unfortunate. The good news is I have Earthquake. Earthquake will deal some solid chip damage here. My opponent goes for the Surf. Avalugg able to tank it, and now I'm going for the Earthquake. Earthquake is shielded, but this sets up the potential for a Wild Charge from Zacian. They get the full farm down here. In comes Zacian. Zacian gets the Snarl through as they go for the Surf. Can I make it to the Wild Charge here? Zacian gets to the Wild Charge. This will KO. Then it's going to be a race. Can I farm down the Groudon? The Groudon is very low. Going for the farm down. Groudon lives on 1 HP. Makes it to the Fire Punch. KOs the Zacian. And that's game over. Picking up a great lead in the next match, Giratina into Landorus. My opponent save switches into Dialga, and I'm actually going to immediately send in Zacian. The thing is, I don't need switch advantage in this game, because whether the Landorus is aligned against the Giratina or against the Avalugg, it's going to have an absolutely terrible day. So I can just send in the Zacian. My opponent goes for the Iron Head, that's going to connect. I'm farming up to the Play Rough, but I was a little slow on my switch, and my opponent wins CMP there. And unfortunately, I'm not able to force a shield. I send in Avalugg looking for the Ice Fang farm down. Dialga lives on 1 HP, makes it to the Iron Head, and I'm forced to go down a shield. That is absolutely tragic, but in the back, they have Lugia. Oh my goodness, another team that is just way too weak to ice. Avalanche is going to connect, farming up here with the Avalugg. Avalugg going for another Avalanche here. My opponent has to shield this. Going for the Avalanche. They no-shield it, putting their faith in the Landorus, but what's Landorus going to do against an Ice Fang user? And the opponent concedes the match. We are hard countered by a spicy pick in the next match, Giratina Origin into Hydreigon. I save switch into Zacian. My opponent farms up and then sends in a Mudshot Garchomp, and their team is clearly core broken by Zacian. I'm firing off the Play Rough. That's going to connect, dealing massive damage. Earth Power would hurt, so I decided to keep the Zacian healthy, but this is a Sand Tomb Garchomp. You have got to be kidding me. Shielding a debuff move just feels absolutely terrible. They go for the Sand Tomb. I'm looking to farm up with the Zacian, going for the Play Rough before they're able to make their next move. Play Rough is going to be lethal. We'll have to see what do they have in the back, and it's a Smackdown Tyranitar. This thing just core breaks me. What am I supposed to do here? Unfortunately, I can go for the Wild Charge, but I can't make another one, and I'm just in so much trouble here, as I can send in the Giratina, but Smackdown Tyranitar is just the perfect core breaker for the team that I'm running. They're going to fire off a Crunch here. That is going to hurt. I'm going for the Shadow Ball, but Shadow Ball just does nothing to Tyranitar. It is a Dark type. They tank it like it's nothing, and I'm going to send in Avalugg. My only hope, my hope against hope, is that I can shield, fully farm down somehow, and leave with enough energy to KO Hydreigon. I'm looking for the farm down, but it's just not going to happen. Smackdown Tyranitar, my opponent bringing the spice, and it works for them as Tyranitar farms down the Avalugg. Hopping into the final match, picking up a very nice lead, Giratina Origin into Purified Apex Ho-Oh. I'm going to be staying in this matchup. I could go for the Shadow Ball as soon as I get it and be able to outpace, but I actually want to preserve some energy here. So I'm going to let them hit me with the Brave Bird and see what they want to do. They send in Dialga, and Dialga save switches are tricky. This is why I saved the Shadow Ball. So I can Shadow Ball, get the chip damage, and now they're in a range where a Play Rough will KO. I'm bringing in the Zacian. They're able to outpace. I will commit a shield, but I can massively overfarm here before going for the Play Rough. So I'm going to massively overfarm, go for the Play Rough, and after my opponent sees Play Rough, they may not necessarily be expecting Wild Charge. Back in comes the Ho-Oh. I'm farming up, and I'm going for the Wild Charge. We'll see. Does the opponent respect it? Yes, they do. Opponent anticipating Zacian's moveset. They commit the shield. I'm going to shield back because you know what? I have a lot of energy here. They go for the Brave Bird. I decide to go for one in the move here just because I am trying to get rid of this Ho-Oh as soon as possible. They shield. The Incinerate damage is going to register. In the back, my opponent has their own Zacian. I'm going to bank a move and send in Giratina. Giratina going for the Shadow Ball. This Shadow Ball definitely going to hurt. My opponent is running Quick Attack, so the question is, are they double nuke or do they have Play Rough? My opponent goes for a Wild Charge and they're on double nuke. I can finish the fight with Avalugg here. They can go for a close combat, but watch this. Avalugg does not care about close combat, gets the farm down. Opponent sends in Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh does not want to get hit with an avalanche, so they throw some energy here. Sacred Fire is going to get the KO, but I have so much energy stored from earlier on my Zacian. Zacian, Wild Charge, takes down Ho-Oh, and that's game over. All in all, I had a ton of fun using Avalugg. Avalugg is definitely anti-meta, as in the meta of the Master League is still very much unchanged. However, I do like Avalugg's potential to be a bit of a core breaker. There's a tendency in a lot of open Master League teams right now to run very weak to ice, because frankly, there's not a lot of ice types being used. So potentially running something like Avalugg or even Mamoswine. I prefer Avalugg just due to the bulk, but Mamoswine, if you're looking for more charge move pressure, can catch some opponents off guard. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is absolutely incredible. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.